What is up, you guys? In this video we're going to be rerouting the cargo area wire harness so that it's within the body cavity of the van. You may have seen other people do this where they actually cut the wire and re-splice everything together. I'm going to do it a little bit differently and try to reroute everything without actually cutting any of the cables. The main reason I want to do this is so that I don't actually void my warranty and everything looks factory and OEM and functions as it should. Splicing the wires could lead to some issues down the road. Who knows, maybe a year later or 10,000 miles later. The way we're going to do it today, we're going to ensure that it's done almost OEM. So I'm going to put a quick disclaimer on here. If you guys don't feel comfortable doing any electrical work, I would hire it out to somebody who knows what they're doing, maybe a professional. Like you, I'm just a DIYer. I'm just doing this based on my own research. So if you're gonna follow this video, I would do it to supplement your own research, not necessarily rely on my video as a guide or a step-by-step tutorial to do the rerouting of the cables. With that said, let's do it. First thing we're going to need to do is remove the cable tray. Not only does it get in the way of the cabinets, but it just looks hideous. I'm sorry, Ford, but you got to do better than this. Here's what the cable harness looks like before we reroute it into the body cavity of the van. First thing we're going to do is remove this LED track light. Really simple. There is an outlet plug right here. Just got to undo that. For this particular connector, you're going to want to jab a plastic trim tool and move the hook from the back of the clip, which will allow this thing to slide forward. So you push this thing in and then pull this thing out. Now for this type of connector that holds the larger wire harness, the best method of removing these clips I found is to be just pretty aggressive and having one hand here and one hand here and pulling it out. Alright, so on the rear of the van, we're going to have to disconnect the third brake light outlet right up there. You're going to need to disconnect both LED lights, and that should allow you to pull this thing out from this section. I've mentioned this in a previous video, but I highly recommend you guys picking up some of these interior trim tools. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. Front two LED lights are out. That was very simple with the pry tools. Here's the harness. I'll save this for later. I might route the entryway lights underneath that overhang, so when I open the door, it'll light up that step, which would be nice. For those curious, this is what's behind those ugly foam blobs. Got the side airbag in there. We're gonna take the, I think it's the XM radio antenna or Wi-Fi antenna, and reroute that first. Have it go maybe from here and up, so that it doesn't get in the way of the cabinets. Here's the after shot. Make sure you're labeling your plugs, so that way when you put it back together, it makes your life 100 times easier. We got one more plug on the rear brake light, and this thing comes down. The next couple steps involve unplugging the earthing cables or the grounding cables from the rear on both sides. And what we're actually going to have to do is unplug the cigarette lighter over there, those harnesses in this cavity, and then also we have to remove the taillights. For these grounding cables, you're going to need to use an 8mm socket. There are two screws holding the rear taillights. There's one right there, and there's another one right there. There are actually two more clips that need to be popped out. Once you get the screws off, you can kind of see it in here. Let me see if I can. Right there. And then there's the other one right in here, which is that black clip right there. Just gotta push that out. To help me get that clip pressed in, I actually used a angular set of pliers. Get in there and push that thing in, and then this whole thing just comes out, and then you can unplug the wire loom from the taillight, because you're going to be pulling. So now that the taillight's been removed, here's part of that wiring loom that I was talking about. We're going to push it back in and pull it out through the cavity of the bodywork. Alright, everything's disconnected and pulled through the rear. We got to just take that whole loom and pull it out of that hole right there. Here's that loom taken out of that hole. Much easier than I thought. For the passenger side, you can actually just unplug this big connector here. Should be a button on the other side right there. And you don't have to mess with all the cabling for that. But we're going to repeat the same steps on this side as we did on the driver's side by removing the taillight and feeding that loom all the way up and through that hole. Unplug your active park assist module. You don't actually have to back the screws all the way out. The location actually allows you to just pull it out slightly and then lift the whole thing up and it comes out. Alright, so here's where it gets a little tricky. We got one cable snagging us up. And if we look to where that takes us, it's right, I don't know if you can see that. Right there. So I'll unplug that and see if we can route this thing back up. Likely for the Bliss sensing radar module and the park assist. Look at how ridiculous this looks. All right, passenger side taillight is out. We're almost there. You're gonna want to unplug the harness from the bumper for the radar sensing and take the bottom plastic piece off. All right, guys, I passed the point of no return. So here's where that cable comes out of. I had to take out the side body panel. Just a side note, when you pull this trim piece off, you're gonna undoubtedly break these clips. No getting around that. You could probably get this stuff from Ford or Amazon for like 5 cents a pop. So just keep in mind, I did manage to save one at the bottom there, but I'll be addressing that later. Let's get this thing pulled out. Don't repeat my mistake here, guys. You don't actually have to remove that wire harness from the bumper. Go ahead and take this vent off. You're gonna see that there's some filter or insulation in here. Move that aside, and you'll see where you're gonna need to unplug. There we are. Here we are. Wiring loom pulled out of the passenger side. What we're gonna need to do is trace it back and run it through the bodywork all the way through here. Pop out there, come up inside this bodywork, and up and around and back down for a nice clean install. Alright, so I've begun the process of rerouting through the bodywork. You're gonna hit a snag right here, so I needed to pop out there. This guy is way too big to fit through that hole right there. Make sure you pull everything tight because you're gonna decrease the length as you go in and out of this cavity. Here's a little tip. When you're pulling the loom through the cavities, pull it through the end of the loom or of the cable plugs. That way you're not pulling each one individually and you can just drag it out through the cavity. Makes it a little bit easier. All right, the loom is in the bodywork. We're gonna take this section and run it down that cavity, through that hole, down to the taillights. So we gotta get this last section of loom through this square opening. To help us do that, I went ahead and taped up some of the more obscure pieces of cable or plugs to make fishing it down that pillar just that much more easier. Lesson learned here, guys. Make sure you leave the taillight out but when you go to install the trim piece back on, or else you won't be able to do it. All right, the taillight is back in. Just one tip, make sure you give it a good push after you've screwed it in. Remember, there's those two fasteners on the inside that hold this thing in so it doesn't fly off when you're driving. One of the last steps you'll want to do is put a little bit of tape where the cord or the wire loom meets the body panel. These edges are sharp and you don't want it cutting your electrical. All right, we are all done, guys. Check it out. Much cleaner than having that wire chase. LEDs are in. Now I can close this whole header off with a nice flat piece of wood or something cleaner. And then that condition can get cleaned up with a piece of trim. Everything's back together. Much easier than I thought, actually. What a crazy weekend working on the van. That is it, guys. I am all done with rerouting the cargo area wire loom. That thing was a beast. Half of it was pretty much done on the fly. I got a little help from John from the UK. One of the forum members helped me out in the beginning. I think he had a older model Transit. Some of the things were different and I wasn't able to actually completely route it through the body work. So, but super happy how it turned out, and now I can install my cabinets and the wires won't get in the way. One other thing I'd like to say, just if you guys don't feel comfortable working with electrical, get somebody to help you out, get a professional to help you out. Electrical is no joke, and although this seems simple, I would just take every precaution, wear gloves, and undo your battery, and yeah, and take your time. So if you're gonna follow my guide, I would just supplement it with your own research. Don't rely on it completely, and good luck and be safe. Thanks, guys. Oh, one other thing, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button or write a comment or ask a question. It really helps the channel grow and spread with YouTube's algorithm. And if you haven't already, consider becoming a Patreon and donate to my Patreon page. If my videos have helped you at all or inspired you to start your own van project or whatever project, it helps me continue doing what I'm doing. So thanks, guys, for watching, and stay safe. Shot of the